when you say culture fit and you want me to walk and talk and think like you, then that's not diversity. That's just being like you.
Technology is transforming how we think, how we lead, and how we win. From Intervision, this is Status Go, the show helping IT leaders move beyond the status quo, master their craft, and propel their IT vision. Welcome to Status Go. I'm your host, Jeff Tunn. I meet with a lot of CIOs and IT leaders, and one of the topics that invariably comes up is that of attracting and retaining talent. It's hard to find good people. The skills we need to keep driving our business have changed. Our schools are trying to help close the skills gap. What were once considered soft skills are now required to be successful. Today's guest is on the front lines of the skills gap battle. Linda Calvin is the Vice President for the School of Information Technology at Ivy Tech Community College, the state of Indiana's largest public post-secondary institution and the nation's largest singly accredited statewide community college system. Welcome to the show, Linda.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
So, Linda, let's start with your journey. Tell us a little bit about that journey, your career, and what led you to Ivy Tech.
Well, I started my career in IT really just kind of accidentally. Um, my my sister said to me one day when I was 20 years old, she says, "What are you doing? What are you going to do with your life?" And I thought I was doing it. I had a little job and working in an office, and on Fridays we got to have beer. So, I thought, wow,
How
I have
cool is that?
scored. Yeah, scored big time. But she said, you need to start thinking about what you're going to do for a career. And so let me introduce you to it was Wishard Memorial Hospital at the time, and let me introduce you to our computer operations. And at the time, I said I don't know anything about computer operations, and I didn't have a degree. And so I learned from her. So that was really the jump start of my career. I walked in, started working with VAX VMS systems, which no one's ever heard of these days, and from there it just progressed. And so I found myself at Dow AgriSciences, which is now Corteva, and I was there 20 years. Started in IT in the help desk. So when you called the help desk back in the day, you got me.
Yeah.
And then I journeyed throughout the organization in various roles, but all had an IT component, even though, it may have been working in R&D, working in field R&D. Um, every single role had an IT component. And finally, I found myself in the public affairs department at Dow AgriSciences.
Interesting.
And I did a number of different roles, mostly around communications, but all had the tech component until finally they said to me, we need someone to really help us unleash the power of digital. And so I spent my last 10 years leading digital. And at the time when I was leading it, it was building web pages and AdWords and buying domain names. And then it evolved to social media and understanding social media and the impacts from a regulatory perspective. And then mobile app development, which was really big for the ag space. A lot of people don't think that, but very big. From there, during that time, I pursued my Juris Doctor, and I left Dow AgriSciences and became a prosecutor for the city of Indianapolis. And then I had another role at a tech company, and finally spent my last couple of years at Stanley Black and Decker as the IT digital leader in Indianapolis. And I was searching for an opportunity where I can really make a difference but still be tech. And I saw the role at Ivy Tech, and it said VP of IT. Typically, I wouldn't have applied for that because I thought, VP of IT, just more implementation of IT stuff. And I really wasn't
Right.
looking for that. And then I read the job description. It was working to have a relevant tech curriculum for our students to ensure that we can get them in the jobs and give them the skill sets they need to secure the jobs in the ecosystem today, as well as work with employers, number one, to make them aware of our students, get them hired, but also internships and apprenticeships, and also to engage employers and organizations to understand what that Ivy Tech has a robust school of IT. So that's my journey. I'm thrilled to be at Ivy Tech today, and I get to do both. I get to talk about tech all day, which how cool is that?
That's very
Um,
cool.
Very cool. And I also really feel like I'm giving back to community and trying to attract more women and minorities into tech, as well as make our tech curriculum robust for the students that come in. So it's a thrilling job, and I'm really excited to be a part of the Indianapolis tech ecosystem.
So, as you look back on that journey, you've had some very interesting and, for those of us in tech, unusual experiences. I'm thinking about being the prosecutor. How do you take those skills, those lessons learned over that career and apply them to what you're doing today? What types of things come in handy, so to speak?
So I think, I mean, first and foremost, the tech experience, right? Growing up and being in that ground floor of bouncing systems up and down. So
Hmm.
I understand the technology, but also leading teams to where we have app development and web development. So I can speak to employers about talent and understanding the skill sets that they need, understanding the complexities of CapEx and OpEx, and also understanding the processes required for software development lifecycle. So certainly that is the largest experience. But I
Hmm.
think, a lot of people say it's weird that you have, the prosecutorial experience plus
Yeah,
communications. You're a certified. I'm a certified Scrum Master, by the way. So I say, oh, you're a certified Scrum Master. How does that fit together? And really, it's about problem solving.
yeah,
Because that's what legal teaches you is how do you look at and analyze a situation, an argument, and come out with a resolution. So that's what I apply every day. Is it's looking at, if we have a campus, for example, that really wants to spin up an IT program, but they're not sure where to start. It's looking at their service area, their county,
mhm,
their student population, and saying, okay, what do we need to meet? What are your needs in your county and where you're serving? And then how do I bring that back to you to suggest programs that can help you build a more robust IT? So really and then communication, of course. I
yeah.
mean, being able to articulate and message is critical to all of our jobs really, but I think it's a very nice convergence, my skill sets to my job today.
Yeah, I think the communication skill is one of the most underrated skills when you look at IT professionals. The ability to communicate complex subjects in a way that people can understand is vitally important. And I think that fits a little bit with what I was talking about in the opening is not only do we have this skills gap where there's more openings than qualified candidates a lot of times, but the target is moving. The face of IT is changing and what is required of us is changing. So how are you able to focus on the future with Ivy Tech to address that widening skills gap?
Well, it's a number of things, right? So it's Jeff, number one, it's talking with employers and understanding what their needs are. I mean that's critical to Ivy Tech because what we're doing is we are helping students walk out of school and land that job and start smashing code or start understanding their networking issues. So it's really working with employers on a regular basis to understand what their needs are, but it's also, attending so many different conferences and seminars to see what we're facing in the future. We hear a lot about how AI and ML are going to displace a lot of workers. So what we have to understand is, okay, what's the timeline where we're going to see that transformation of those manufacturing organizations? And some say 5 years, some say 7 years, but understanding, okay, what do we have to do from an educational perspective to start incorporating that into our curriculum But then also, if you there was an article I recently read, that said Salesforce was about to explode, which I was like, "Okay, they haven't already," because they're
Yeah,
you know, but they are poised to be even more, integrated into companies and systems with privacy and data and IoT. So, okay, we have these relationships with Salesforce and Apple, which they see that technology is going to explode for them. So, how do we work with them to have curriculum so we're preparing students? So it's really, to the point that you made, it's really communication. It's a lot of meeting and talking and reading, understanding what the state's needs are. And in our geographies, because we're 42 locations across the state. So, what are those geographies facing? Some of them have very unique problems or very unique situations. And so, understanding what they see with their community leaders and how we respond.
so how can our IT listeners, our listeners, how can they get involved to help from their side of the equation?
So, I thought about this a lot. And really, the first thing is talking with from an Ivy Tech perspective. I have colleagues. I have a vice president of healthcare and nursing. There's a vice president of advanced manufacturing, of business and logistics. So it's really working with us to have conversations. We want to understand what you're seeing, in the marketplace. We want to understand what your employee needs are and the skill sets that your employees need, those that you have now. How do we skill them up? So really, it's a conversation with the IT leaders, to understand the needs, just from a tech perspective, right?
Mm.
Um, but also to understand too is how you can, partner with Ivy Tech. There's so many ways. We need advisory boards, and we have advisory boards, Jeff, that inform our curriculum, that help us make decisions on what we need to do with our programs.
Mm.
So every location and campus will have an advisory board. Plus, the fact is that we need industry people on advisory boards for our individual programs. So right now we offer 9 different IT degrees, from database to networking infrastructure, server administration. Software development. So we're always looking for those in industry that can give us feedback to say, hey, you know what? You don't need to be teaching Microsoft Access, which we all should know that. But, what we really see is MongoDB, for example, or we
Right.
see the a lot of IoT devices and all that data coming in, and organizations not understanding how to massage and download that data. So those are the conversations that we really want to have with IT leaders. And me personally, if I could have someone call me every day and want to sit down and have a meeting, I am there.
Well, and I think one of the things I was thinking about on a previous episode, we talked with Doug Thies, who does the IT Leaders Group in the Indianapolis area, and myself, who does the Indy CIO Network, and would really love to get you plugged in there because I think that could give you some of that feedback from the tech community. So we can talk about that and maybe make some of that happen. What I'd like to do right now, Linda, is shift gears just ever so slightly and talk about a topic that I know you are fiercely focused on, and that's diversity and inclusion. So let's start with what's probably obvious. How can creating an environment of diversity and inclusion help close the skills gap we've been discussing?
Well, and I think there are on LinkedIn every day you see posts and articles that diversity fuels innovation. So you need to have a very diverse workforce to help you understand different needs, bring different skill sets, um, and different perspectives to help you build a really great product. I mean, I think that's first and foremost. I think we get it. And I think you can read articles from Forbes and a host of other, websites and tech publications to show that, hey, we get it. The industry knows this.
Yeah.
So I think that's first and foremost. I mean, I think the challenge is we have, I don't know how many thousands of job openings just in the state of Indiana in tech, and we have a lot of out migration happening from our four-year institutions still. um, there are a number of organizations, Jeff, and I think you're probably aware of a number of initiatives that the state and these organizations have come together to try to get the talent here, to stay
Right.
here.
Right.
But there's still, opportunity is opportunity when you graduate from college. And so we need talent here. And I think that employers need to think differently about their requirements for hiring to get to that diversity. So, the four-year degree has always been the foundation of everything and of how you get the job, and rightfully so. It's education is essential. But, you have the tech industry basically coming out and saying, you don't need a four-year degree to get started in tech.
Right.
And so, we need companies to start thinking about it differently. And that also gets to diversity, because now you're going to look you're going to have a different pool of resources, right? So you're looking at
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
community colleges who have a very diverse population. You're looking in those areas where maybe you have underrepresentation. Um, to say, hey, how can we get the skill set so they can come into our building and start smashing code? So I think those things are essential. And I think from an industry perspective, tech has some work to do.
Yeah, I think so. I think when we talked about this, I know at an event last December that the numbers really haven't moved much. And in fact, in some cases, the numbers have gone down when you look at diversity, especially gender diversity specifically.
Right.
So, one of the things that is now something that you read a lot about is inclusiveness versus diversity. Not against, but it's more important to have an inclusive organization. And when someone says that, what are they meaning, Linda? What things are involved in creating that inclusive environment?
I think in my experience in working in so many organizations that have a focus on trying to be more diverse, is as that's what they miss, to your point, is that inclusivity. So, for example, you can say, "Hey, we really want to have more women in our
Hmm.
organization." So we look at those organizations in Indianapolis and in Central Indiana that really serve women in the tech space. We reach out, we recruit, but then we don't retain that talent
Right.
because of our culture is not set up um, to welcome more women or more African Americans. So
Hmm.
that's what inclusivity is about. It's not just, I want to hire 10 people and all of them African American women, Hispanic, LGBTQIA. It's not just that. It has to be that your culture is inviting and doesn't suppress those new perspectives and those different people and backgrounds. And I think that's inclusivity. It's understanding and taking the temperature of your culture. So, Jeff, a lot of people right now are in organizations are saying, okay, we're going to do the unconscious bias test
Right.
and we're
Right.
going to create some affinity groups. And then that's diversity. And that's not diversity. And we'll have a lactation support room. That's not
Yeah. Yeah.
diversity.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, those things are great to have, but really diversity and inclusion really says it's not just about what you look like, it's how you operate. And it's understanding and helping employees understand where their biases are, and then holding leaders accountable to make that change. And through your leadership and others in the community, you can work with them to help them understand and identify where those changes can happen, but also in having a dialogue and a conversation to flip the script. That's what, to me, inclusion really gets at, is how you invite that diversity in and capitalize on having those different people in your organization.
So it goes beyond the checkbox, right? Of
Exactly.
let's look at this percentage, and as you're interviewing, make sure that you have diverse candidates. It really is it's an education process because we're not aware always of our unconscious biases or things that are microaggressions in our own organizations. And I had to chuckle to myself a little bit when you mentioned the lactation rooms, because as CIO back in the day for Goodwill, we had Nurse Family Partnership, which is a program aimed at helping low income expectant women to learn how to take care of themselves, take care of their baby, and then when the baby's born, continue to nurture that baby. And I can't tell you how many meetings I was in when lactation came up as a subject, and I'm thinking, I'm the IT guy. This is kind of strange.
Right? And I think
Uh,
it's great though when you hear that and when you go to these organizations, I mean, even now in the airports you can see, the family restrooms and I think that's awesome. It's indicative that you're thinking about it. But that in and of itself is not an indication of embracing diversity and inclusion. It's just
yeah.
that you've done the thing. It's the tactic. Jeff, I've heard a lot of people talk about culture fit. Right. Oh, we
Mhm.
want to, and you see it in job descriptions on LinkedIn. I bet today, if you sat down and Googled Indeed or went on LinkedIn and looked at job descriptions, you would see at least one mention of, can you fit into our culture?
Mhm.
Well, I think fundamentally we get where that came from and what we're trying to communicate. But culture fit can mean that essentially, do you look, walk,
Mhm.
and talk like us? And
Right.
again, so that undermines the whole idea behind inclusion, because it's not like, can you be like us? Now, of course, if you have a goal of saying teamwork, right? Communication, and innovative thinking, that to me is like, okay, yeah, we want to attract people that have those skill sets and those abilities and emotional, intelligence. But when you say culture fit and you want me to walk and talk and think like you, then that's not diversity. That's just being like you.
Right. Right.
So I think that people really need to understand when they're and HR people need to help leaders and leaders need to help HR people, that when you're writing these job descriptions, it's not only not using that language, but also when you're writing that and saying, we want you to come and belong and we value your input, we value your perspective. Do you have a culture that really sustains that? And I think that's the question that people need to ask. And it's a hard question, Jeff. It's not easy to take a look, because there are going to be some things that you may uncover that you're like, wow, I
Yeah.
hate that.
Yeah.
But that's okay. To me, you should not be afraid at all. I worked at a company and we were they were going to do their first employee engagement survey, and I was on a call with a group of leaders, and they were like, well, you're probably going to hear employees say this, and you're probably going to hear employees say that. And I don't know. And we're really afraid of what was going to come out of it. And I said, look, it's difficult to hear it. Just like when you sit down with your boss and,
Right.
on your performance management, it's difficult to hear those opportunities, if you
Yes.
will.
Uh-huh.
Um, but when you actually hear them and understand them, then you can address them. And that to me is the better part of this that can help you. So I think that, especially in IT, especially in IT, leaders need to take that hard look, right? And then figure out, how do I address them and who do I need to help me do this?
Yeah, yeah. So are our schools, our universities, our community colleges, are they teaching diversity and inclusion? Is that something that they're trying to work into the curriculum for that next generation?
I think, what we've heard from a lot of employers is that we need, to make sure that our students understand emotional intelligence
Mm,
and personality styles and how to work better in teams. So I think in a roundabout way, yes. Now, are we teaching specific, courses on diversity and inclusion? Not in the purest sense, Jeff, but
mhm, yeah,
what we are trying to do is, number one, there are clubs and throughout a lot of colleges, there are women in technology clubs, IT clubs.
Right.
Um, you have different affinity group networks, but I think a lot of that comes to play into play when we start putting teams together within those courses, right? And that you have Sally and, John, Ted, Samantha, Brakisha, and you have all of these different people coming together to work together in a team. And I think that's where we're really starting to infuse that learning of how do you engage with someone that thinks differently than you do.
Right, right, and that's really the key. It's one of the benefits is diversity of thought because people take different approaches to problem solving, as we were talking earlier about the problem solving aspect of what we do, and to have different perspectives on how to solve the problem make us all stronger and better.
Yes, absolutely. And I'll say this too. One of the things that we're doing at Ivy Tech, and we have every year we have an IT challenge, and it's for Ivy Tech students across the state. And they all converge on Indianapolis and have different IT challenges. And then at the end of the day, there are awards, and we have a career fair and all kinds of really cool stuff, right? And
Mhm.
but typically it was campus against campus, and so this year we're doing it differently because we discovered from the an AT&T hackathon back in the fall of last year. We brought a statewide team together. The students came back and said, I really liked working with other people from across the state because I'm just in my little group
Interesting.
here. And so this year at our hackathon, I said, you know what? Let's keep that going, and we're bringing all the students in. We're going to have them sign up, and then we're going to assign them to teams. So it's not going to be Fort Wayne against Lake County against Lawrenceburg,
Uh-huh.
against Indy. It's going to be a group of people from our various programs. So you're going to have cybersecurity, database, visual communications, and UI UX people all together, and we're going to put them onto teams because that's work, right?
Oh,
If
yeah,
you think
yeah.
about it, that's what you're getting when you walk out of school and walk into the workplace. You may be working with people from various cross functionally disciplines within IT alone, but also from a business perspective. And you're going to have people on the phone, they're going to be overseas.
Mhm.
So that's what work is about. And those are the types of things that I think we, as educational institutions, can make sure that we're doing is providing opportunities for our students to have that real world experience.
And learn how to be open to others' thoughts. That's a great idea because even in a state the size of Indiana, there's different cultures. Each community kind of has its own culture. So you're mixing in that diversity of thought by ingesting that into the teams. That's a fantastic idea.
Yes, I'm just so excited about it. But I think the other great thing is, to your point about how we expose students to diversity. I mean, I think this is a primary lesson because there's going to be someone on your team that you're not going to agree with. And guess what? That's work.
Yeah,
But that's work.
right.
But what you'll do is you will, because you understand at the end of 8 hours, right? You have to deliver a product. So you're going to have that negotiation, but also you're going to say, well, I don't really know this, but you know what? This person knows this.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that gets at the core of diversity and inclusion, diversity of thought, style. And then you'll have different,
Hmm.
to your point, I mean, across the state you just have a lot of different people, and that's the
Yeah.
wonderful
Yeah.
thing about at Ivy Tech is that we have our population is very reflective of our communities. And so I think, Jeff, I
Hmm.
just want to make a point is that's the other great thing about working with our students in an Ivy Tech is that from a tech perspective and a tech talent gap perspective is that our students want to stay here. And that's what we need, right, for the state of Indiana.
Yeah.
So, and we have a diverse
Exactly.
population. So the employers can say, hey, wow, I know if I work with Ivy Tech, I have a diversity strategy where I want to get
Right.
someone with a different background. Wow, I can do that. But
Yeah.
again, kind of closing the loop on that conversation, it comes back to employers thinking differently about who and what and where they need to hire.
Yeah, exactly. Linda, I always like to end these conversations with a call to action. So, what's one or two things that our listeners, our IT leaders that are listening in today, what should they do different tomorrow because they listened to us today?
Well, first, I think understanding what organizations, educational organizations, and some of these community organizations that are trying to um, enhance skills and tech skills and understand the programs. There are a number of organizations, Code Black Indie, Women in High Tech, Women
Mhm.
Who Code, um, just a number of organizations that are doing the good work to nurture the skill sets to address tech talent gap and diversity. So
Yeah,
I think number one is making a appointment, putting it on the calendar, and reaching out to someone in those organizations to understand more. I think that's the first thing. I think the other thing to do is, of course, you can always reach out to me and connect with me on LinkedIn and say, Linda, I want to learn more about what you're doing at Ivy Tech in the School of IT. I mean,
that's
to
kind
me,
of how.
that's easy. But I think the other thing, really, because the biggest issue that we have that can really get to the gap and the talent and the retention is diversity, right? So I think number one is there data that the IT leaders can get their hands on from HR, from employee engagement surveys, that talks or speaks to what challenges the organization is facing. Number one, um, I think the other thing is, if there's a way for those IT leaders to have some conversations within, if there are ERGs, employee resource groups, affinity groups, that IT leaders can reach out to those different groups to say, "Hey, I want to have a conversation." I think that's the easy stuff to do, or the low hanging fruit. Not easy,
Right.
but low hanging fruit you can do within your own organizations. But I think the other thing, Jeff, is there are different events. And would you say, I bet there's at least 1 to 2 events a month in just in Indianapolis alone,
Absolutely. Yeah,
where
easily. Yeah,
you can meet and learn about different initiatives and opportunities at diversity. And I think engaging with you, engaging with Julie Kratz,
right.
I think is a great way to get started. There's a session come up, I think, Women in High Tech in February,
Hmm.
where women in STEM are going to talk about their experiences. I'll be on that panel as well. So
Oh,
I
excellent.
think signing up for things like that is also something you can do. Clear the calendar for February. I believe it's February 5th, Jeff. 1:30 to 5:30. Go ahead and move those meetings you have right now,
Yes.
and
Yes.
make sure that you bake in some travel time and parking time and
Right.
go to that session, because you can hear from women, and a diverse set of women, actually, in diverse disciplines, and understand, wow, is that what we have going on in our organization? But then, if you don't know how to tackle it, then again, it's working with diversity professionals such as yourself to have conversations to really help them understand their culture and change it so you can be
Right.
more inclusive. And then I think the last thing, Jeff, is hiring. Right? If you have open jobs, look at the requirements that are posted on the jobs you have on your website right now. Is it really critical that if someone has a 4-year degree, or could you hire someone that maybe you have a 4-year degree in theology but has worked in tech for 15 years,
Right.
or is it someone who has a community college background, or even some kind of certificate from an academy,
Right.
that has 2 years experience, understands agile. So think about it differently, and then work with your HR leadership to say, hey, look, let's make sure we have the right things on our job descriptions. And oh, by the way, Jeff, I think this came up in December, and make sure in those job descriptions, don't say, hey, we're looking for someone to score a touchdown for our team, because,
Right. Right.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
because, right, that's not going to speak to everyone. So I think
Exactly.
those are
Yeah.
the hard things that people can do.
Linda, that is a great set of advice for our listeners, and I think very, very actionable. I want to thank you so very much for taking your time today to talk with us. Would love to connect again in the future, maybe have a deeper dive on some of these topics on future podcasts. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. This was like totally fun. Thank you so much. I was really geeked to be here, and thank you so much for having me.
To our audience, I know that a lot of the actions that Linda and I have talked about, I know you can implement those. Look at your own organization. Even if you're not in Indiana, where Linda and I are from, there are organizations where you live that you can get involved in. There's community colleges where you live that you can get involved with. And I encourage you to look in that direction. If you have questions or want to learn more, Linda's already offered to connect with her on LinkedIn, but you could also go to intervision.com. Our show notes will provide links and contact information. This is Jeff Tunn for Linda Calvin. Thank you very much for listening.
You've been listening to the Status Go podcast. You can subscribe on iTunes or get more information at intervision.com. If you'd like to contribute to the conversation, find Intervision on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter. Thank you for listening. Until next time.